I never spilled the beans to my son about my massive $40,000 monthly salary, even though he had always seen me keeping things simple. One day, he invited me out for dinner, insisting I meet his wife's parents who were visiting from overseas. I decided to pull a fast one and see exactly how they'd treat a seemingly broke and totally clueless older woman the minute I walked through the door of that fancy pants restaurant. However, the whole game totally changed. What went down that evening absolutely crushed my daughter-in-law and her folks in a way they never saw coming, and trust me, they completely deserved every bit of it. Let me lay out the whole situation for you, explaining how I even got to that point. I need to tell you the truth about who I really am, because my son, Marcus, at 35 years old, has been in the dark about his own mother this entire time. To him, I was nothing more than the woman who'd leave early for her job, come back wiped out in the evenings, and just cook whatever ingredients we had sitting in the fridge. He figured I was just another entry-level employee, maybe a secretary, someone completely ordinary, nothing to write home about. I never bothered to correct that false impression. I never let him know I was pulling down 40 grand every single month, that I had spent nearly 20 years as a senior executive at this massive multinational company, signing contracts worth millions and making pivotal decisions affecting thousands of people's lives. Why would I even bother to brag about it? Money was never something I felt the need to display like some shiny participation trophy on the mantelpiece. I grew up in an era where having genuine dignity meant more than loud, empty talk, where keeping quiet was often more valuable than running your mouth. So, I just kept my real life on the down low. I've lived in the exact same modest apartment for years, rocking the same leather handbag until it was practically falling apart at the seams. I consistently bought my clothes from bargain discount stores, always cooked meals at home, saved every single dime, invested everything wisely, and became seriously rich in complete silence. True power doesn't need to shout from the rooftops, you see. True power just watches and waits. And I was observing very intently when Marcus finally gave me that call on a random Tuesday afternoon. His voice sounded off, a little shaky and nervous, just like when he was a kid and knew he was in some major trouble. "Mom, I need to ask you a huge favor," he said quickly. "Simone's parents are visiting from overseas, and this is their first trip here. They really want to finally meet you. We're doing dinner on Saturday night at a nice restaurant, so please, you totally have to come." Something about the tone in his voice immediately set me off, making me feel really uneasy about the whole situation. It honestly didn't sound like a son lovingly inviting his mother. It sounded exactly like someone begging desperately not to be totally embarrassed, needing me to just blend in and not mess up his good impression. "Do they actually know anything real about me?" I asked him, keeping my voice totally level. There was this long, awkward silence before Marcus started stammering out his response. "I just told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're just simple, that you don't really have much." There it was, the word simple, as if my entire, complex life could be reduced to that one totally lame and miserable adjective, as if I were some kind of awkward issue he constantly had to apologize for. I took a slow, deep, deliberate breath to compose myself, and simply replied, "Okay, Marcus, I'll absolutely be there." I hung up the phone and casually glanced around my living room, taking in the old but sturdy furniture, the walls completely lacking any expensive artwork, the small, basic television, basically nothing that would seriously impress anybody. Right then and there, I decided if my son genuinely thought I was some poor little woman, and if his in-laws were showing up fully ready to judge, then I would absolutely give them the exact performance they expected. I decided I would show up looking totally broke, utterly naive, and slightly desperate, the picture of a mother just barely scraping by in life. I truly wanted to experience firsthand how they would act towards someone who essentially had absolutely nothing. I needed to see their completely unvarnished, true faces because I seriously suspected something fishy was going on. My gut told me that Simone and her entire family were the types of people who judged everyone else based solely on the size of their bank accounts. And let me tell you, my instincts, honed over decades in the corporate jungle, are almost never wrong. Saturday finally rolled around, and I deliberately put on the absolutely worst outfit I owned in my closet. It was a light gray, shapeless, ridiculously wrinkled dress, the kind of cheap thing you'd find languishing at a discount thrift store. I paired it with old beat-up shoes, completely zero jewelry, not even a watch. I grabbed a faded, worn-out canvas tote bag, yanked my hair back into a completely messy, lazy ponytail, and took a serious look in the mirror. I looked exactly like a woman, completely broken down by life, someone totally forgettable, perfect. I hopped into a taxi and gave the driver the address. It was one of those baller high-end restaurants located deep in the most exclusive part of the city, the kind of place where the menu prices are intentionally hidden, where every single place setting costs more than the average person's monthly paycheck. As we drove through the bustling city streets, this weird feeling started washing over me, a strange combination of excited anticipation and deep, heavy sadness. Anticipation was bubbling up because I absolutely knew that something major was about to go down. Sadness was there because a tiny, foolish part of me still held out hope that maybe, just maybe, I was completely wrong about them. I wished they would treat me with genuine kindness, that they would just look beyond my purposefully worn-out clothes. But that other part of me, the one that had spent 40 years successfully navigating a world full of corporate sharks, that part knew precisely what kind of treatment was waiting for me. The taxi finally pulled up right in front of the restaurant, bathed in those expensive, warm lights, with a doorman wearing crisp white gloves, and seriously elegant people streaming inside. "Mom, you said you'd definitely come," he stammered, his voice laced with pure discomfort. "Of course, son, here I am," I replied, giving him the nervous, shy smile of a woman totally unaccustomed to such a bougie setting. Simone gave me a very quick peck on the cheek, a cold, purely mechanical gesture, as she said, "Mother-in-law, it's nice to finally see you." Her eyes, however, were telling a totally different story, screaming the opposite sentiment. She introduced me to her parents in a weird, clearly apologetic tone. "Dad, Mom, this is Marcus's mother." Veronica immediately looked up, giving me the once-over. And in that exact moment, I saw everything I needed to see: the judgment, the raw disdain, the crushing disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled, shapeless dress, my worn-out shoes, and my old canvas tote bag with a palpable air of disgust. She didn't say anything right away, just stuck out a hand that was cold, quick, and delivered a totally weak shake. "A pleasure," she said flatly. Franklin did the exact same thing, giving me a weak handshake and a totally fake, forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. I sat down on the chair at the absolute end of the long table, the one furthest away from them all, making me feel like some third-string guests they reluctantly had to include. Absolutely no one offered to help me pull out my chair, nor did anyone bother to ask if I was remotely comfortable. The waiter arrived carrying the elegant, heavy menus, which were completely written in French. I opened mine and made a show of pretending I couldn't understand a single thing on the page. Veronica watched me struggling intently, then asked, with a small, patronizing smile that totally failed to reach her eyes, "Do you need a little help with the menu, dear?" My voice came out small and timid as I requested, "Yes, please." I really don't know what any of these big words even mean. She let out this audible sigh and promptly ordered for me instead. Get her something simple, she instructed the waiter smoothly, something that doesn't cost too much. We truly don't want to splurge unnecessarily. That cutting phrase just hung heavy in the air, while Franklin nodded in agreement and Marcus nervously looked away, playing with his napkin. Nobody said another word, and I just kept watching them all closely. Veronica finally broke the silence, starting with small talk about general things like their international trip, how grueling the long flight had been, and how different everything was here in the US. Then, she subtly began to bring up the serious topic of money, dropping hints about their super expensive hotel, which cost $1,000 a night, and the luxury car they had, obviously rented. She made sure to mention the seriously high-end stores they had casually visited, boasting, "We only bought a few little things, nothing major, just a couple $1,000 worth." She kept talking, making sure to look directly at me, clearly expecting some huge reaction, anticipating me to be completely impressed by her supposed wealth. I simply just nodded along. "How nice," I replied simply. "That's lovely," she continued, pressing harder. "You know, Elara, we've always been incredibly careful with all our money. We worked hard, and we invested extremely well. Now, we own properties in 3 different countries. Franklin has some major businesses, and I oversee all our family investments." She flashed a toothy superior smile and then hit me with the loaded question. "And you, what exactly is it that you do for work?" Her tone was sickly sweet but undeniably venomous. "I work in an office," I replied, slightly lowering my gaze. "I just do a little bit of everything, some paperwork, filing, just simple stuff." Veronica immediately exchanged a significant glance with Franklin. "Ah, I see, administrative work." She dismissed me condescendingly. "That's perfectly fine. It's honest work. All jobs are dignified." "Right, of course," I responded smoothly. The food arrived quickly, enormous plates featuring minuscule portions, all arranged like expensive art. Veronica began meticulously cutting her steak and pointedly mentioned, "This little piece costs a full $80, but it's honestly worth every penny. You simply can't compromise on quality, right?" I nodded politely in agreement. "Of course, you're absolutely right." Marcus quickly tried to steer the conversation away, starting to talk about his current work projects, but Veronica promptly interrupted him. "Son, tell me, does your mother live all alone?" Marcus nodded reluctantly. "Yes, she has a small apartment." Veronica then looked straight at me, putting on a show of fake pity. "That must be quite difficult, isn't it, living all alone at your age without much real support?" she probed. "And does your salary even truly cover all your expenses?" I sensed the calculated trap closing in, but I gave a simple answer. "I manage fine. I save where I can. I truly don't need much." Veronica then let out a dramatically exaggerated sigh. "Oh, Elara, you are truly so brave. I genuinely admire women who manage to struggle completely alone. Although, naturally, one always wishes they could have given their children more, maybe a better start in life. But oh well, everyone only gives what they possibly can." There, it was, the subtle, deadly blow. She was explicitly telling me I was totally insufficient for my son, that I hadn't given him the life he deserved, branding me as a poor, totally inadequate mother. Simone was staring intently at her plate. Marcus was visibly clenching his fists under the table, and I simply kept my smile plastered on. "Yes, you're right," I agreed, gently. "Everyone only gives what they can." Veronica kept going strong. "We always made absolutely sure that Simone had the very best. She attended the top schools, traveled the entire world, and learned 4 different languages. Now she holds an excellent job, earning really well, and when she decided to marry Marcus, well, we hooked them up quite a bit. We gave them the money for the down payment on their house. We paid for their entire honeymoon because that's just how we operate. We strongly believe in fully supporting our children." She looked directly at me, intensely curious. "And you? Were you able to help Marcus out with anything significant when they got married?" The question hung there, sharp and painful like a freshly drawn knife. "Not much," I admitted plainly. "I gave them what I could afford, just a small gift." Veronica gave a patronizing smile. "How sweet. Every little detail counts, doesn't it? The actual amount truly doesn't matter. The intention is the important thing." Right then, a cold, intense surge of pure rage started to slowly stir deep inside me. The rage wasn't wild or explosive. It was cold, fully controlled, like a dangerous, powerful river flowing steadily beneath a thick sheet of ice. I continued, breathing slowly, maintaining my timid smile, and deliberately let Veronica keep running her mouth because that's exactly what people like her inevitably do. They constantly talk. They inflate their own importance. They show off their supposed wealth. And the more they just keep talking, the more they unknowingly reveal themselves, ultimately exposing the profound, gaping emptiness deep inside. Veronica took a deliberate sip of her pricey red wine, slowly swirling it in the glass as if she were some kind of certified sommelier. This wine is from a super exclusive region in France, she informed me smugly. It's $200 a bottle, but when you genuinely appreciate quality, you don't worry about the cost. She then turned her gaze to me. Do you even drink wine, Elara? Only on rare, special occasions, I replied modestly, and it's usually the cheapest bottle I can find. I don't understand much about these sorts of things. Veronica offered a patronizing, condescending smile. Oh, don't you worry your head over it. She dismissed me. Not everyone has a trained palate. You know, that kind of refinement just comes with extensive experience, serious travel, and a proper education. She continued to boast. Franklin and I have visited vineyards all across Europe, South America, and even California. We're quite knowledgeable, to be honest. Franklin nodded his head in agreement, chiming in, it's a hobby for us, something we truly enjoy doing together. Simone is learning quickly too. She has good taste. She definitely inherited it from us. He looked at his daughter with a look of immense pride, and Simone gave a weak, forced smile in return. Thanks, Mom. Veronica turned her focus back to me. And what about you, Elara? Do you have any hobbies at all? Anything you genuinely enjoy doing in your free time? I gave a minimal shrug. I watch a little television. I cook. I take walks in the park. Just simple, regular things. Veronica and Franklin immediately exchanged another significant look, one that was heavily loaded with silent, clear judgment. How absolutely lovely, Veronica declared with false sincerity. Simple things certainly have their own specific charm, I suppose, she continued, twisting the knife slightly, although, naturally, one always aspires to achieve more, right? To truly see the world, to experience all the new things, to grow intellectually and culturally. But, well, I certainly understand that not everyone gets those amazing opportunities. I simply nodded my head, acknowledging her point. You're right, I said softly. Not everyone is given those opportunities. The waiter then arrived with the dessert, which were tiny servings of something that looked like intricate edible art. Veronica immediately ordered the most ridiculously expensive one, $30 for a tiny piece of cake the size of a cookie. This is truly delicious, she pronounced after her very first bite. It has edible gold flakes sprinkled right on topsy, those tiny golden bits. That's a detail only the most elite restaurants offer. You know, I just quietly ate my own dessert, which was much simpler and cheaper. Remaining completely silent, Veronica suddenly changed her tone, becoming serious and falsely maternal. You know, Elara, I think it's really important that we talk about something as a family, now that we're all finally here together. She looked up, her expression changing completely. Marcus is our son-in-law, and we genuinely love him very much. Simone loves him, and we absolutely respect their decision to marry, she added. But as parents, we always want the very best for our daughter. Marcus immediately tensed up, trying to stop her. Mom, I really don't think this is the right time for this conversation. Veronica held up her hand to silence him. Let me finish, son. This is extremely important. She then looked directly at me. Elara, I understand you honestly did the best you could while raising Marcus. I know raising him alone wasn't easy, and I truly respect you for that effort. She didn't let up. But now Marcus is at a completely different stage in his life. He is married. He has serious responsibilities. And well, Simone and he deserve to have true stability. Stability? I asked her gently. Yes, Veronica confirmed. Financial and emotional stability. We have already helped them significantly, and we absolutely will continue to help them out. She finished her thought with clear precision. But we also strongly believe it's critical that Marcus doesn't have any unnecessary baggage weighing him down. Her tone was absolutely unmistakable. She was labeling me, his mother, a complete burden. Simone was staring intently at her plate, probably wishing she could just magically disappear, and Marcus had his jaw painfully clenched. Burdens. I repeated the word slowly. Veronica sighed dramatically. I don't want to sound totally harsh, Elara, but at your age, living completely alone on a limited salary, it's only natural for Marcus to worry about you. to feel this deep obligation to constantly take care of you, and that's fine. He's a good son. She delivered the kicker, but we seriously don't want that worry to start affecting his marriage. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Perfectly, I replied instantly. Veronica's face brightened with a satisfied smile. I'm so glad you understand, dear. That's why Franklin and I wanted to talk to you tonight. We've put a lot of thought into a plan. She paused for maximum dramatic effect. We could totally help you out financially, give you a small monthly allowance, something that would allow you to live more comfortably without Marcus having to worry so much about your well-being, she continued, detailing the supposed charity. Obviously, it would be pretty modest. We can't work actual miracles, but it would definitely be a form of support. I stayed completely silent, just watching her, waiting for the true cost. And in return, she finally explained, we would only ask that you seriously respect Marcus and Simone's space, not to seek them out so much, not to pressure them constantly, to give them the freedom they need to build their life together without any kind of interference. There it was, the offer, the bribe completely disguised as charitable giving. They were trying to buy me off. They intended to pay me to basically vanish from my own son's life, just so I wouldn't be a massive annoyance and wouldn't embarrass their precious daughter with my supposed poverty. Marcus completely blew up. Mom, that's seriously enough. You absolutely don't have to do this. Veronica immediately cut him off. Marcus, just calm down. We're talking like mature adults here. Your mother totally understands, right, Elara? I calmly picked up my napkin, gently wiped my lips, took a slow sip of water, and just let the silence stretch out painfully. Everyone at the table was staring at me. Veronica with greedy expectation, Franklin with pure arrogance, Simone with deep-seated shame, and Marcus with total desperation. Then, I finally spoke, and my voice was completely different now. It wasn't timid anymore, and it certainly wasn't small. It was firm, incredibly clear, and chillingly cold. That's definitely an interesting offer, Veronica, I conceded. Truly very generous of you both. Veronica instantly smiled, thinking she had won the whole battle. I'm so glad you see it that way. I nodded slowly. But I just have a few minor questions, just to make sure I understand everything clearly. Veronica blinked, momentarily thrown off. Of course, ask whatever you like. I leaned slightly forward across the table. How much exactly would you consider to be a modest monthly allowance? Veronica hesitated a moment. Well, we were thinking maybe $500, possibly $700, depending on the situation. I nodded again. I see. $700 a month for me to completely disappear from my own son's life. Veronica frowned deeply. I wouldn't exactly phrase it like that, Elara, but yes, I responded firmly. That is precisely how you put it. She adjusted uncomfortably in her chair. Elara, I really don't want you to misunderstand. We simply want to help you. Of course, I agreed, easily help. How much did you help with the house down payment? What was the actual amount you gave them? Veronica nodded, beaming with misplaced pride. $40,000. A clean $40,000, actually. $40,000, I repeated. How extremely generous. And the honeymoon? $15,000, Veronica stated, adding, it was an amazing 3-week trip throughout Europe. Incredible, I replied, my voice dangerously even. Unbelievable. So, you have invested approximately $55,000 total in Marcus and Simone. Veronica smiled brightly, completely missing the threat. Well, when you really love your children, you don't hold back at all. I nodded very slowly. You're absolutely right. When you love your children, you don't hold back. I leaned in closer and lowered my voice. But tell me something honestly, Veronica. All that investment, all that huge amount of money, did it actually buy you anything real? Veronica blinked rapidly, utterly confused. Like, did it buy you genuine respect? I continued, my gaze unwavering. Did it buy you real, unconditional love, or did it just buy you their total obedience? The entire atmosphere around the table instantly solidified. Veronica's triumphant smile completely vanished. Excuse me. My tone immediately sharpened like a knife. You have spent this entire evening talking non-stop about money, about how much everything costs, how much you've spent, and how much you still have in the bank. I pressed her hard, but you haven't asked even once how I'm actually doing, if I'm happy, if something is bothering me, or if I need some company. I delivered the final verdict. You have only calculated my worth, and apparently, I'm only worth $700 a month to you. Veronica's face went completely pale. I didn't. she started weakly. Yes, you absolutely did. I interrupted her, cutting her off cleanly. From the second I walked in the door, you have been measuring my entire value solely with your wallet. I let the cold truth sink in. And do you know what I've discovered tonight, Veronica? I discovered that the kind of people who only talk about money are actually the ones who understand their true worth the least. Franklin immediately tried to intercede. I think you are seriously misunderstanding my wife's genuine intentions, Elara. I locked eyes directly with him, ready to drop the mic. And what exactly are her real intentions, Franklin? Was it to just treat me with pure pity all night? Or was it to openly humiliate me throughout this whole dinner? Was it to offer me mere handouts so that I would finally just peace out? Franklin opened his mouth to speak but quickly realized he had absolutely nothing to say. Marcus was visibly pale, begging me, "Mom, please, stop." I looked right at him and gently shook my head. "No, Marcus, please don't tell me to stop. I am completely done being quiet about this." I calmly placed the napkin back down on the table and leaned back fully in my chair. There was absolutely no more shyness in my new posture. No more shrinking away from them. I looked directly into Veronica's eyes with a steely gaze. She held my stare for maybe 1 second, then quickly and uncomfortably looked away. Something huge had shifted in the atmosphere, and she definitely felt it, just like everyone else at the table did. "Veronica, you said something really interesting just a minute ago," I began. "You mentioned that you admire women who manage to struggle alone, women who are truly brave." Veronica slowly nodded her head, confirming, "Yes, I absolutely did say that." "Then let me ask you something specific," I challenged her. "Have you ever actually struggled completely on your own? Have you ever had to work without your husband's financial backing you up? Have you ever built anything significant with just your own 2 hands, entirely without relying on your family's money?" Veronica started to stammer, clearly flustered. "I have my own achievements, you know." "Like what, exactly?" I asked her, with genuine curiosity this time. "Please, tell me about them." Veronica nervously adjusted her hair. "I manage all our investments. I oversee all the family properties. I make important strategic decisions for our various businesses." I nodded in full understanding. "Businesses your husband completely built, properties you bought together as a team, investments made using the money he originally generated, or am I completely wrong about all that?" Franklin immediately cut in, clearly annoyed. "That is totally unfair, Elara. My wife works just as hard as I do." "Of course," I replied calmly and coolly. "I don't doubt for a second that she works hard, but there is a seriously huge difference between just managing money that already exists and actually creating that money from absolute scratch," I pointed out sharply. "There's a massive difference between simply overseeing an empire you inherited and having to build it yourself. Brick by painstaking brick, don't you agree?" Veronica pressed her lips together tightly. "I truly don't know where you are trying to go with this, Elara. Let me explain it all to you," I said, finally ready to spill the tea. 40 years ago, I was just 23 years old. I was working as a secretary in a small, sketchy company. I earned the minimum wage at the time. I lived in one tiny rented room. I ate the cheapest food I could possibly afford to buy. And I was completely alone, totally alone in the world. Marcus was staring at me now. I had never ever told him this much detail before. I continued to lay out the full story. One day, I got pregnant. The father completely vanished. My own family completely turned their backs on me. I had to make the hardest decision: keep fighting or just give up. I chose to keep fighting for my life. I pressed on. I worked until the very last day of my pregnancy. I went straight back to work just 2 weeks after Marcus was born. A neighbor kindly took care of him during the day for me. I worked 12 hours a day, every single day. I paused and took a long drink of water, and nobody at the table dared to speak a single word. I didn't stay a secretary forever. I went to college at night. I enrolled in countless courses. I taught myself English at the public library for free. I mastered accounting, finance, and business administration. I became an expert in things that no one ever bothered to teach me. I looked around at their stunned faces. I did all of that on my own, all while raising a child completely alone, all while consistently paying for rent, food, medicine, and clothes. Veronica was now fixated on her plate, her overwhelming arrogance clearly beginning to crumble into dust. "And you want to know what happened next, Veronica?" I climbed that corporate ladder step by small step, from secretary to assistant, from assistant to coordinator, from coordinator to manager, and finally, from manager to director. It took me 20 solid years of relentless work. I delivered the final blow. 20 years of non-stop work, of sacrifices that you cannot even begin to imagine. But I absolutely did it. And do you actually know how much money I earn now? I asked her directly. Veronica just shook her head blankly. $40,000 a month. The resulting silence was instant and absolute, as if someone had forcibly slammed the pause button on the entire universe. Marcus's fork clattered loudly onto the floor. Simone's eyes were wide as dinner plates. Franklin frowned in utter disbelief. And Veronica was completely frozen, her mouth slightly hanging open. $40,000. I repeated the figure clearly, every single month for almost 20 straight years. That totals nearly $10 million in gross income just over my career so far. And that's not even counting my smart investments, my annual bonuses, or my company stock. Veronica started blinking rapidly, unable to process the numbers. No way, I don't understand. You earn $40,000 a month. That is precisely right, I replied, my voice completely calm. I am the regional director of operations for a huge multinational corporation. I oversee all operations across 5 different countries. I manage budgets totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. I finish my list of credentials. I make critical decisions that directly impact over 10,000 employees worldwide. I sign contracts that you couldn't even begin to read without a team of corporate lawyers by your side. And I do this every single day. Marcus was utterly pale. Mom, why, in God's name, did you never tell me any of this? I looked at my son with deep tenderness. Because you didn't need to know, son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing hard effort and struggle, not just a pile of money. Because I desperately wanted you to become a decent person, not just some spoiled heir. I explained patiently. Because money is a serious corrupting force, and I wasn't going to let it corrupt your soul. Then Simone finally whispered, completely confused, but why do you live in that tiny, small apartment then? Why do you constantly wear such simple clothes? Why don't you drive some fancy luxury car? I smiled gently at her question. Because I have absolutely zero need to impress anyone, dear. Because genuine wealth is never openly shown off, I explained calmly. Because I learned that the more you actually have, the less you feel the need to desperately prove it to other people. I then looked straight at Veronica and delivered the powerful truth. That is exactly why I came dressed like this tonight. That is why I deliberately pretended to be poor. That is why I played the role of a broke and naive older woman. My voice turned lethal. I wanted to see precisely how you would treat me if you truly believed I had absolutely nothing to my name. I concluded with finality. I wanted to see your true colors, Veronica. And man, did I see them perfectly. Veronica was now completely red with a toxic mix of shame, burning rage, and deep humiliation. This is absolutely ridiculous. If you earned that much money, we would have found out somehow. Marcus would know. Why would he honestly believe you are poor? Because I let him believe it, I replied simply. Because I never bragged about my job. Because I deliberately live a simple life. I elaborated for them. Because the money I actually earn, I immediately invest it. I save it. I multiply it carefully. I don't waste it on flashy, expensive jewelry or trying to show off in ridiculously expensive restaurants like this one. Franklin tried to intervene again, clearing his throat awkwardly. Even if all this is true, Elara, this still doesn't change the fact that you were rude, that you clearly misinterpreted our original intentions. Really. I looked at him unblinkingly. I misinterpreted when you explicitly said I was a financial burden to Marcus. I continued to list his offenses. I misinterpreted when you offered to literally pay me $700 a month to disappear from his entire life. I misinterpreted every single condescending comment about my clothes, my job, and my whole life. Franklin had no answer. Veronica remained silent. I finally stood up fully from the table, commanding everyone's attention. Let me tell you something important that clearly no one has ever told either of you. Money cannot buy class. It does not buy genuine education. It definitely cannot buy empathy. I looked at them with profound disappointment. You have money, perhaps even a lot of it, but you do not possess a single ounce of what truly matters in life. Veronica immediately stood up too, absolutely furious. And you do, you, who openly lied, who deliberately deceived us, who made us look like absolute fools tonight. I didn't make you look like fools at all, I replied, my voice stone cold. You handled that entire task all on your own. I simply gave you the opportunity to show exactly who you are, and you executed it absolutely magnificently. Simone now had tears welling up in her eyes. Mother-in-law, I honestly didn't know anything about this. I know, I interrupted her softly. You didn't know the truth, but your parents knew exactly what they were doing to me tonight. They knew exactly that they were humiliating me, and they seemed to genuinely enjoy it until they figured out the supposedly poor woman they were scornfully ignoring actually has way more money than they do, and now they look completely clueless about how to handle that massive truth bomb. Veronica was shaking where she stood. You have no right to do this, she stammered out weakly. I have every single right, I shot back at her. Because I am the mother of your son-in-law, and because I deserve respect, I continued my point firmly. Not because of my money, not because of my job title, but simply because I am a human being, something you completely forgot about during this entire dinner. Marcus finally jumped up. Mom, seriously, please, let's just bounce. I looked at him steadily. Not yet, son. I am nowhere near finished with this conversation. I fixed my gaze on Veronica one final time. You offered to help me out with a pitiful $700 a month, so allow me to make you a massive counteroffer. I will literally give you $1 million cash right now if you can prove to me that you have ever treated even one person kindly who didn't have any money. Veronica opened her mouth wide, clamped it shut again, and remained totally silent. Exactly, I replied, feeling absolutely no remorse. You can't, because to you, people are only ever worth what they've got in their bank account. I stated the core difference between us, and that right there is the fundamental difference between you and me. I built my wealth, you just frivolously spend it. I earned my respect, you try to buy it. I have true dignity, you just have bank accounts. I reached for my old canvas tote bag and slowly pulled out a shiny black platinum credit card. I dropped the slick card onto the table right in front of Veronica. This is my corporate card, by the way, with an unlimited spending limit, I informed her coolly. Pay for the entire dinner using this card, and be sure to leave a massive, generous tip, to consider it a little gift from a broke and naive mother. Veronica stared down at the card as if it were some kind of venomous snake. The card was jet black, intensely shiny, with my name deeply engraved in silver letters. Elara Sterling, Regional Director. Her hand actually trembled slightly when she finally picked it up. She turned it over once, observed every detail, and then looked back up at me. Her eyes no longer held that superior, arrogant gleam. Now, there was a completely different emotion in them, something I honestly never thought I'd ever see from her. Pure fear. I don't need your money, she whispered, her voice cracking under the pressure. I know that already, I replied flatly. But I didn't need your condescending pity either, and yet you offered it to me non-stop for the entire dinner. So, please, just take it as a gesture of courtesy, or perhaps good manners, something you clearly failed to learn, despite all your fancy travels throughout Europe. Franklin suddenly slammed his hand softly on the table. Enough of this nonsense. This whole thing is completely out of control, and you are being utterly disrespectful to us. Respect. I repeated the word back to him, my eyebrows raised. How wild that you would suddenly use that word now. I challenged him directly. Where exactly was your respect when your wife questioned whether my salary was enough to even live on? Where was it hiding when she suggested I was a heavy burden on my son? Where was your respect when she openly offered to buy me off so I would disappear completely? Franklin clenched his jaw tight, completely unable to meet my eyes. Veronica just wanted to help you, he insisted weakly. I immediately corrected his lie. No, Franklin. Veronica wanted control. She desperately wanted to ensure that the poor, embarrassing mother wouldn't ruin her daughter's perfect, pristine image, I clarified. She was trying to eliminate the weakest link in their little family chain. I delivered the punchline. The problem, however, is that she chose the totally wrong link to mess with. I turned to look at Simone, whose head was bowed low, her hands resting in her lap, noticeably trembling. Simone, I said to her softly, breaking through the tension. She looked up instantly, huge tears streaming freely down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, she whispered brokenly. I'm so sorry that my parents. Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted her firmly, but gently. Because you did know what they were like. Maybe you didn't know about my money, but you absolutely knew how your parents behave. I looked her square in the eyes. You know how they treat people they consider beneath them, and yet you stood right there and did absolutely nothing to stop them. Simone started to sob heavily. I wanted to say something, I really did, but they are my parents. I couldn't. I know that completely, I replied, my voice softening just for her. And Marcus is my son, and yet I let him make all his own decisions. I let him freely choose his life, his wife, his entire path, because that is what true love is. Freedom, not control, not money, and definitely not cheap manipulation. Marcus stepped closer to me, his shoulders slumped. Mom, please forgive me. His voice broke with emotion. Please forgive me for never asking about you, for just assuming things, for thinking you were. I pulled him into a warm, tight hug. You don't have to apologize for a thing, son. I did what I did for a very specific reason. I explained my long-held motivation. I wanted you to grow up truly independent, to value the right things in life, not to be financially dependent on me, but to bravely build your own life. But you made me feel like I absolutely had to protect you, Marcus said, choking up. You made me feel like I had to constantly worry about you, that you were so fragile. I know that, honey, I replied, holding him close, and it wasn't wrong for you to think that, because that is precisely how you learn to care, to genuinely worry about others, and to develop real empathy. Those are the priceless life lessons that money can never cop. Marcus hugged me back tightly, full of genuine regret. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so incredibly sorry. Veronica was still standing there, completely rigid, watching the emotional scene with a toxic mix of confusion and suppressed rage. This still doesn't change anything at all, she finally managed to say, her voice tight. You lied. You deceived us. You walked in here tonight with totally hidden intentions. You acted in complete bad faith. That's completely true. I nodded in agreement. I pretended to be something I am not. Which is exactly what you do every single day. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Franklin demanded sharply. It means you both constantly hide behind your money, behind your expensive jewels, behind your exotic trips, behind every single thing you can afford to buy, I stated plainly. But inside, you are both completely empty. You don't have any deep conversations. You have no real interests. You have absolutely nothing meaningful to offer beyond a massive bank account. Veronica gave a dry, bitter, humorless laugh. Coming from someone who lied all night, that sounds like pure hypocrisy. Elara, perhaps it is, I conceded easily, but my lie served a purpose. It exposed the absolute truth, your truth. I warned them about the consequence, and now you can't possibly hide from it. Now you know that I saw right through you, that I felt every single comment, that I stored away every insult disguised as advice, and that I will never, ever forget any of it. The waiter cautiously approached the table, looking timidly at the wreckage. Excuse me, would anyone like anything else at all? Franklin shook his head abruptly, his voice a low growl. Just bring the damn check. The waiter quickly nodded and disappeared. Veronica slowly sat back down, looking completely defeated. Her posture was no longer sharp or elegant. It was the posture of someone who had just lost something incredibly important, and it definitely wasn't money she'd lost, it was power. Elara, she said, her voice now much softer, far less aggressive. I really don't want this whole mess to completely ruin the relationship between our two families. Marcus and Simone truly love each other. You know, they've got a whole life together. You know, we simply can't let this. I cut her off sharply. Let this what, Veronica? Let this ruin your meticulously crafted plans. Let this expose what you really think about people. My voice was firm. It's already too late for all that. The damage is totally done, but we can fix it, she insisted desperately. We can start completely over from scratch. No, I countered firmly. We absolutely can't, because now I know exactly who you are, and you finally know who I am, and that kind of raw truth cannot be erased with some empty apologies or fake smiles. I reminded her pointedly. You treated me like pure trash tonight, and you did it with obvious pleasure, simply because you thought you could get away with it. Franklin loudly cleared his throat again. You were the one who showed up here lying, Elara. You clearly provoked this entire awful situation. You're right about that, I conceded with a nod. I provoked this because I desperately needed to know the truth. I needed to confirm what my gut already suspected. I leveled with him that you are not good people, that your money doesn't actually make you better than anyone else, that you are the exact kind of folks who openly despise others for not possessing the same material things you have. Veronica weakly wiped away a tear. We are not bad people, though. Maybe not bad people. I replied pointedly. But you are definitively not good, and there is a seriously huge difference between those two things. Trust me. The waiter returned with the check and gently placed it right in the center of the table. No one dared to touch it. Veronica looked down at my black card still clutched in her hands, then back at me. I am not going to use your card, she declared stiffly. We will pay our own bill, just as we always do. Perfect, I responded easily. Then keep that card as a permanent souvenir, a solid reminder that not everything is ever as it seems, and that the woman you scorned all night long has more than you will ever have. I added a chilling warning. And I'm not just talking about money here. Veronica quickly dropped the black card onto the table. I don't want it, she snapped. I also don't want your obvious moral lecture. I calmly pushed the card back toward her. Keep it anyway, because something tells me you're going to need a big reality check later on. I explained my prediction. Someday you'll run into someone else just like me, someone who pretends to be less than they really are, and you'll inevitably make this exact same mistake again, because people like you genuinely never learn anything new. Franklin immediately pulled out his expensive wallet, filled with several gold and shiny credit cards. He picked one out and placed it firmly on the check. The waiter took the card and quickly walked away. No one spoke a single word during the agonizing wait. The silence was thick, deeply uncomfortable, and incredibly heavy. Simone was quietly crying into her hands. Marcus tightly held my hand. Veronica stared rigidly at the wall. Franklin checked his phone obsessively to avoid any eye contact. The waiter finally returned with a sheepish look. Sir, your card was unfortunately declined. Franklin abruptly looked up, his face turning bright red. Declined. How was it possibly declined? The waiter simply repeated the word, declined. Do you happen to have another way to pay? Franklin turned even redder with rage. That's utterly impossible. That card has an extremely high limit. It has to be a system error. The waiter merely shrugged his shoulders. I can try again, if you would like me to. Franklin furiously handed him a second card. The waiter left again. Veronica nervously looked over at her husband. What on earth is happening? I don't know what the heck is going on, Franklin replied, clearly irritated. It must be some kind of massive bank error. Maybe they just temporarily froze the account for security reasons. It happens sometimes when you're traveling overseas. I nodded slowly with a feigned, innocent understanding. Of course, those kinds of things happen all the time. How incredibly inconvenient for you both. The waiter returned to the table a third time. I'm sincerely sorry, sir. This card was also declined. Franklin stood up quickly, his patience gone. This is completely ridiculous. I'm calling the bank right now. He stormed out of the restaurant in a total huff. Veronica remained sitting there, looking deeply ashamed and completely humiliated. This has never, ever happened to us before, she mumbled to the table. Never in our lives. What absolutely terrible timing for a first time, I commented dryly, without showing any emotion whatsoever. Marcus looked at the check sitting there. Mom, I can pay for it. No, Marcus, I interrupted him sharply. You are absolutely not paying for a single thing. I took out my wallet, a simple, worn old leather wallet, and pulled out another card. This one wasn't black and fancy. It was transparent, made of a heavy, solid metal, a card that less than 1% of people worldwide possess. I placed it deliberately on the table, directly in front of Veronica. She looked at it, and her eyes went wide instantly. She definitely recognized what it was. That's a Centurion card, she breathed out, completely awestruck. That's right, I confirmed coolly. An exclusive, invitation, only American Express card. Minimum annual spending requirement of $250,000, a $5,000 annual fee just for the privilege of owning it, and benefits you could never even begin to imagine having. Veronica couldn't say a word. The waiter took the card with extreme care, as if it were some sacred, delicate artifact. He returned in less than 2 minutes flat. Thank you very much, Miss Sterling. Everything is completely settled. Would you like to have the receipt? It's not necessary, I replied, dismissing the paper. The waiter nodded and left us alone. Veronica continued to stare blankly at the empty space where the card had just been. I finally stood up, picked up my old wallet and my canvas tote bag, and looked at Veronica one last time. The dinner was seriously delicious, I said, giving her a small smile. Thank you for the recommendation of the place, and thank you so much for showing me exactly who you are on the inside. I finished with a flourish. You just saved me a lot of future time, a ton of energy, and many, many future disappointments. Veronica finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from pent-up rage and deep shame. "This absolutely does not end right here," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You can't just humiliate us like this and then walk out as if nothing happened tonight. Simone is our daughter. Marcus is our son-in-law. We will still be family. You are going to have to see us again." "You are completely right about that." I smiled, accepting the truth. "I will definitely have to see you at birthdays, Christmases, and other family gatherings." I gave her the hard truth. "But now I will see you through a completely different lens. I will no longer wonder what you truly think of me. I already know now, and you will know that I know the truth about you." I concluded my warning, "and you will have to live with that knowledge. Every single time you see me, every time you try to pretend to be kind or generous, you will remember this whole unforgettable night." Franklin stomped back to the table, his phone clutched in his hand. His face was ghostly pale. "There's a massive problem with the accounts," he announced weakly. "A temporary block for security reasons. It's supposed to be resolved first thing tomorrow." He glanced around the table nervously. "Did they pay the check already?" "Yes," Veronica replied flatly, without looking at him at all. "She paid." Franklin looked over at me, his pride completely shattered into a million pieces. "Thank you," he mumbled, barely audible. "You're welcome, Franklin," I replied kindly. "That's exactly what family is for, right? To seriously help each other out, especially when someone needs a small allowance, say $700, or in this case, $800, which is what this entire meal cost." Franklin closed his eyes in pure defeat. Veronica clenched her fists tightly in her lap, her fury contained. Marcus stepped forward gently. "Mom, let's go now, please. It's absolutely enough." I looked at him tenderly. "You're right, son. It is absolutely enough now." I turned to Simone. She was still quietly sobbing. "Simone," I said softly to her. She slowly lifted her head to look at me. "You are not to blame for how your parents have chosen to act. No one gets to choose their family." I emphasized the choice she still had. "But you definitely get to choose how you act, how you treat other people, and how you will choose to raise your own children someday." Simone nodded her head frantically through her tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "Don't apologize anymore," I instructed her gently. "Just promise me you will learn from this experience." I gave her my final lesson. Learn that money does not define people, that being humble is never a weakness, that respecting others costs you nothing at all, and that if you ever have children, teach them to see people's hearts, not just their bank account balance. Simone began to sob harder, and Marcus immediately pulled her into a comforting hug. Veronica deliberately looked away, avoiding all eye contact. Franklin checked his phone yet again, clearly trying to vanish into his small screen. I turned and headed for the exit. I took a few steps, then paused, stopping completely, and turned back around one last time. "Ah, Veronica, one more final thing before I leave." She looked at me, wary. "Do you remember telling me earlier that you speak for different languages?" Veronica frowned, completely confused. "What does that have to do with anything right now?" "Just curious," I replied with an icy smile. "In which of those 4 languages did you happen to learn how to be kind to other people? Because clearly, it wasn't in any single one of them." Veronica opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out at all. "Exactly," I finished, delivering the final, devastating blow. "You could speak 100 different languages and still not say anything that is truly worth listening to." I finally walked straight out of the restaurant, Marcus immediately following beside me. The crisp, cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep, relieving breath. I felt as if a colossal weight had been instantly lifted off my chest. Not a physical burden, but a huge emotional one. The heavy weight of pretending, of tolerating their arrogance, and of choosing to remain silent. Marcus took my arm firmly. "Mom, are you okay after all that drama?" "Perfectly fine, honey," I replied honestly. "Better than I've been in years, actually." "And what about you, Marcus? How are you doing?" Marcus let out a huge sigh of exhaustion. "I don't even know. I'm still processing everything in my head," he continued, sounding stunned. "I absolutely cannot believe you never told me about your real job, about all that money, about everything you have actually accomplished." I stopped walking and looked him right in the eyes. "Does that bother you now, son?" He quickly shook his head in denial. "No, of course not. I am so incredibly proud of you. Incredibly stoked." Honestly, he admitted his error. But I also feel like a total fool. I feel blind. You are not a fool at all, I reassured him gently. You simply saw exactly what I wanted you to see all those years. I explained my choice one last time, and I did it completely on purpose, Marcus, because I needed you to grow up without the safety net, without depending on me, without feeling like you had this huge economic cushion waiting for you. I emphasized my goal. I needed you to learn how to fight, to work hard, and to truly value everything you achieved completely on your own. Marcus nodded slowly, finally understanding. I get it now. But now I also finally understand why you never once complained, why you never asked for any help, why you always seemed so unbelievably calm. He finished his thought. Because you never actually needed anything from me. I smiled softly. I needed many things in life, son. Only none of them could ever be bought with money. I listed the priceless things I craved. I needed to see you fully grow up, to see you become a good, decent man, and to see you make all the right decisions. He asked, his voice still weak with doubt. Even marrying Simone, I replied with confidence. She is not the same person as her parents. She can definitely learn from this. She can change for the better. I gave him the final instruction. But that ultimately depends on her, and on you, on how you choose to build your marriage, and on what values you decide to follow together. Marcus remained totally silent for a beat, absorbing everything that had just gone down, clearly deep in thought. A taxi I had ordered through a rideshare app pulled up right in front of us just as we were walking out. I reached for the door handle to open it, but Marcus stopped me. Mom, can I seriously ask you one more thing? He asked, his voice low. Of course, son, anything at all. I closed the taxi door and turned to face him completely. Why did you actually do all that? Why did you come here pretending to be broke? Why didn't you just tell them the real deal from the jump? Because I needed to know, son, I explained simply. I needed to confirm whether my deep-seated suspicions were correct, whether Simone's entire family was genuinely as I'd pictured them to be. I shook my head sadly, and unfortunately, I was absolutely right about them. Marcus dropped his gaze to the pavement. I'm sorry, Mom. You don't have to apologize for their bad behavior, I corrected him gently. But you do need to decide right now what kind of husband you're going to be, and what kind of father you want to be someday down the line. What exactly do you mean by that? He pressed me. I mean, you just witnessed two completely different ways that people handle wealth and serious power, your in-law's way, and mine, I clarified for him. They use their money to control others, to openly humiliate people, and to feel incredibly superior. I use my money to buy myself freedom, to quietly help others without showing off, and to simply live my life in peace. I ended with a challenge. You need to decide which path you are going to follow, Marcus. Marcus nodded his head slowly, taking it all in. I understand, Mom. I opened the taxi door again and climbed inside, then rolled the window down immediately. Marcus leaned in closer to the car. Mom, one last question. Seriously. Shoot, I told him. Are you ever going to forgive Veronica and Franklin? I thought about the huge question for a long moment, letting the silence hang in the air. Forgiving someone doesn't mean totally forgetting what they did, I finally replied. Nor does it mean allowing them to ever pull the same crap again. I continued explaining my perspective. I might forgive them someday, eventually, when I see a real, genuine change in their behavior, when they finally start seeing people as people, not just as bank account numbers. I gave him the current reality. But until that day comes, I will simply be polite to them, keep my distance, and remain extremely cautious. And what about me? Marcus asked, his voice sounding vulnerable. Do you forgive me for not asking the right questions, for assuming things, for allowing this whole disaster of a dinner to happen? I looked at him with profound tenderness. Son, there is honestly nothing for me to forgive you for. You did what you thought was right. You wanted your family to finally meet each other. I assured him it wasn't his fault. That genuine desire is a beautiful thing. What happened afterward was totally not your fault. That was theirs. And yeah, a little bit mine too, because I made the conscious decision to play their sick game. Marcus managed a weak, tired smile. You won the game, though. I won. Yes, I nodded, accepting the victory. But I don't really feel victorious, Marcus. I feel incredibly tired and deeply sad. I explained my disappointment. I confirmed something tonight that I truly didn't want to confirm. That some people will genuinely never change their ways. That some families are fundamentally broken, even if they're loaded with cash. I concluded sadly that there are deep, painful voids inside them that no bank account can ever possibly fill. The taxi driver cleared his throat loudly. "Ma'am, should we get going now?" "Yes, please," I replied quickly. "Just give me one quick second." I looked at Marcus one final time. "Go straight back to Simone. Talk to her honestly. Listen to what she has to say. Support her." I gave him one last piece of advice. "But you must also be completely honest with her too. Tell her exactly how you felt tonight. Tell her what you expect from her parents and what you expect from her." I warned him, because if you don't establish these firm boundaries right now, this behavior is going to happen again and again, forever. "I will, Mom," Marcus promised sincerely. "I love you, Mom, and I mean that even more now than I ever have before, because now I finally know who you really are, and you are absolutely incredible." I smiled warmly at him. "I love you too, son. I always have, and I always will." I gave him the ultimate truth. No matter how much money I happen to have or don't have, because true love has absolutely no price tag. I finished with a dig, and that is the one essential lesson that Veronica and Franklin will, unfortunately, never, ever learn. Marcus stepped back from the taxi door. I gave the driver a small signal. "Can we go now, please?" The taxi started rolling. I looked out the back window and watched Marcus walking back toward the restaurant. His shoulders slightly slumped, clearly deep in thought. He was probably headed back inside to find Simone, to face his in-laws, and to have some seriously difficult conversations. And I felt an overwhelming sense of pride in him, because that meant he was finally growing up. He was learning hard lessons. He was actively choosing to be better than the awful example he had just been forced to witness. The taxi sped through the city's brightly illuminated streets. I closed my eyes for a moment and thought about every single thing that had just occurred, every word spoken, every judgmental look, every moment of raw tension. I briefly wondered if I had done the right thing at all, if I had been too harsh, too mean, or too vengeful in my actions. But then I instantly recalled every thinly veiled insult, every condescending comment, every look of pure disdain, and I knew that, no, I hadn't been too much of anything. I had simply been honest. Finally, the taxi was cruising down the empty streets of the late night. The bright lights of the skyscrapers flashed quickly past my window. I opened my old canvas tote and pulled out my phone. It was a simple, basic phone, nothing flashy, nothing designed to grab any attention. I saw I had 3 unread messages waiting for me. One was from my assistant asking about a meeting on Monday. Another was from a colleague congratulating me on closing a major contract. And one message was from an unknown number. I tapped open the unknown message immediately. It was from Simone. The message read, "Mother-in-law, please forgive me. I honestly didn't know my parents would act like that. I am so incredibly ashamed. I need to talk to you, please." I stared at her text message for a long time, thinking about my response. Then, I chose not to reply right away. No, she still needed more time to think things through. She needed time to process the chaos, too. Words that come rushing out of sheer guilt rarely ever mean anything truly real or lasting. True, genuine change takes time, deep reflection, and consistent, long-term action. I put my phone down on the seat beside me. The taxi driver looked back at me through the rearview mirror. "Excuse me for asking, ma'am, but is everything genuinely okay with you?" I looked up at him. "Yes, everything is fine, thank you." "Why do you ask?" "Well, you got in the car very quietly," he replied, looking a little concerned. "And normally, the people who come out of that particular restaurant are always super happy, talking about how fire the dinner was. You came out looking like you just got back from a war zone." I managed a small, tired smile. "Something like that. Was it really that obvious to you?" He shrugged his shoulders slightly. "I've been driving a cab for 20 years straight. I've seen it all: drunk people, people screaming, couples breaking up in the back, families arguing constantly." He paused, looking intently at me. "And you have that specific look, that look of someone who finally said something they've been holding inside for years and years." "You're very perceptive," I acknowledged, feeling surprised. "It's my job, I guess," he replied casually. "Plus, it helps pass the long hours." "Do you want to talk about it with me?" "You absolutely don't have to, but sometimes it really helps to tell things to a total stranger, someone who isn't going to judge you, someone who doesn't even know your name." I seriously considered his kind offer. It was very tempting to just vent it all out, but I ultimately shook my head gently. "Thank you for the offer, but I think I've talked more than enough for one day." He nodded in acceptance. I totally understand, but let me just tell you this. Whatever went down in there, you definitely did the right thing. He gave me his reasoning. I know that because you're calm right now. You're not crying hysterically. You're not screaming. You're processing it all logically. And that means you spoke your truth honestly. And the truth, ma'am, always brings peace, even if it hurts like hell going out. His simple words genuinely surprised me. He was an older man, maybe around 60, with graying hair and working hands. A simple, honest man, just like the person I had pretended to be all night. Do you truly believe in the concept of truth? I asked him sincerely. I believe in honesty, he replied instantly. Not always the absolute truth, because the truth changes depending on who's telling the story. He clarified his definition. But honesty doesn't change. Honesty is simply saying things exactly the way you feel them, without masks, without any lies, even if it hurts others, even if it makes things awkward, even if it costs you something major. I nodded slowly. You're absolutely right about that. The cab driver continued, sounding reflective. My wife always used to tell me I was too direct, that I just spoke my mind without any filter, and that I probably hurt people's feelings without meaning to. He sighed softly. And maybe she was right about all that. But she also consistently told me that she never once doubted me because she knew that whatever came out of my mouth was completely real, not calculated, not manipulated, just the honest truth. I smiled, genuinely. She sounds like a great woman. She was, he replied simply. She passed away 5 years ago. I'm sincerely sorry to hear that, I offered. He shook his head dismissively. Don't be sorry, ma'am. We had 40 long years together. 40 years of pure honesty, some tough fights, sweet reconciliations, lots of laughs, and some tears, too. He looked ahead, focused. And not once did I ever go to sleep wondering what she actually thought, because she always told me the whole truth, and I told her mine. That, right there, is a total gift. You're absolutely right about that, I murmured, agreeing with his wisdom. It truly is a gift. The taxi paused at a red light. Can I ask you something kind of personal, ma'am? The cab driver asked me then. Go right ahead. Are you rich? The directness of the question totally caught me off guard, not the query itself, but the incredibly blunt way he asked it. Why do you ask me that specific question? I inquired, curious now. Because I picked you up right outside a restaurant that probably costs a stack of cash per person, but you're dressed like someone who shops at discount stores. He laid out his observations. You've got an old worn-out bag, beat-up shoes, but you talk like a top executive. You move your body like someone with serious power, and you paid for my ride with brand new, crisp bills that you pulled out of a wallet that looks 20 years old. Observant, I commented dryly. Part of the job, he repeated his familiar line. So, am I right? It really depends on how you choose to define rich, I replied carefully. If you're talking about actual money, yes, I have enough, more than enough. In fact, if you're talking about happiness, I also have deep peace, good health, a son I love fiercely, and work I'm truly passionate about. I summarized my situation. That combination makes me rich in more ways than one. He nodded his head, completely satisfied with the answer. I knew there was something more to you. Truly rich people, the real deal, don't need to try and prove it to anyone. The traffic light finally changed to green, and the taxi started moving forward. And what the heck went down in that fancy restaurant? He asked me then, if it's not too indiscreet for me to ask. That is, I pretended to be broke, I replied simply, to see exactly how they would treat me. He let out a loud, booming laugh. Seriously, that's totally brilliant, ma'am. And how exactly did they treat you in the end? Like absolute trash, I said flatly, without any emotion. They humiliated me openly. They offered me handouts. They treated me as if I were invisible and less than human. His laughter stopped immediately. I'm sorry to hear that. It hurt a little bit, I admit. I conceded, honestly. But it also completely confirmed something crucial for me. I told him the conclusion I had reached, that I was right all along about those people, that they weren't worth my time, that they absolutely didn't deserve my respect, and now they know it all. I finished with a determined edge. Now they know precisely who I am, and they will have to live with that shame forever. The cab driver whistled softly through his teeth. That must have been seriously epic to witness. It was, I smiled slightly. It definitely was an epic moment. We finally arrived at my building, an older, quiet, middle-class complex. Nothing luxurious, nothing overly impressive, but it was comfortable, safe, and truly my home. The taxi driver pulled over and looked up at the building. "You actually live right here?" "I live right here, yes," I confirmed. He shook his head, astonished by my simple choice. "You truly are something special, ma'am. Most people with your kind of money move into expensive areas, high-rise buildings with doormen, private security, gyms, and rooftop pools." He concluded his observation. "You live like a perfectly normal person." "I am a perfectly normal person," I replied, opening the door. "I just happen to have more money than most people, but that extra cash doesn't make me any different. It certainly doesn't make me any better than anyone else." I gave him my philosophy. Money is merely a tool, you see, not an actual identity. He smiled genuinely. "I wish more people in the world thought that way, ma'am. The world would be a much better place." I pulled out my wallet to pay him. "How much do I owe you for the ride?" $30, he replied. I handed him a crisp $100 bill. "Keep the rest of the change, ma'am. This is way too much for a fare." "It's absolutely not too much," I insisted, pushing the money toward him. "You listened to me patiently. You gave me some much-needed perspective tonight. You reminded me that there are still good people out here." I explained my reason for the generous tip. "That kindness is honestly worth far more than $70. He took the bill carefully. "Thank you, ma'am. Truly, thank you so much." "Thank you," I replied to him. "And please, take care of that honesty you have. It's rare, it's incredibly valuable. Don't ever lose it." "I won't lose it. I promise you that." He promised. I got out of the taxi and closed the door gently. He rolled down his window one last time. "Ma'am, one final thing for you. Tell me what it is. Whatever went down tonight, please don't regret it. Don't feel bad about it at all, because people like Yutha, people who speak the genuine truth, even when it hurts her, the ones who slowly change the world for the better." He added, "Little by little, one tough conversation at a time, you make a difference." I smiled, feeling a deep warmth. "Thank you. I will definitely remember that piece of advice." The taxi finally drove off into the night. I stood in front of my building, gazing up at the fifth-floor window of my apartment. The light was off, dark, silent, waiting patiently for me to come home. I entered the building and immediately started walking up the stairs. I never used the elevator because I preferred the activity. I reached my front door, pulled out my keys, the same basic set I'd been using for 15 years, opened the door, stepping inside. The apartment was cool and empty. I switched on the lights. Everything was exactly in its familiar place. The simple, functional living room, the small, practical kitchen, the dining room with chairs that didn't quite match, the walls totally bare of expensive art. And I felt an immediate sense of peace wash over me, because this space was completely mine, truly mine. It wasn't bought to try and impress anyone. It wasn't decorated specifically to show off my wealth. It was simply a quiet space where I could be completely myself, without any masks, without any pretense whatsoever. I took off my old, worn shoes, peeled off the wrinkled gray dress, and put on comfortable clothes, my old, soft, wonderfully familiar pajamas. I fixed myself a hot cup of tea, settled onto the sofa, and turned on the television. The local news was playing nothing remotely interesting. I quickly turned it off again. I just sat there in the quiet silence, thinking, processing, and deeply feeling everything that had happened. And for the first time in many, many years, I felt entirely free. Free from pretending, free from the necessity of staying silent, free from tolerating their bad behavior, and free from making myself less than I truly was. Because that night, I didn't just expose Veronica and Franklin to the truth. I also completely liberated myself from their expectations, from their judgment, and from my own self-imposed need to hide who I really was. And that profound feeling, that total freedom, was absolutely invaluable, worth far more than any dollar amount currently sitting in my bank account. My phone vibrated on the cushion next to me. Another message notification flashed this time. It was from Marcus. "Mom, did you get home safely?" I smiled immediately. I quickly texted back, "Yes, son, I arrived, perfectly fine. I'm home, and just resting now." His reply was immediate. "I love you. Thank you for everything tonight, for being exactly who you are, for teaching me, and for never giving up on yourself." I closed my eyes, and I felt a single, warm tear roll down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but one of overwhelming relief, pure love, and deep gratitude for my son. I replied simply, I love you, too. Always. I put the phone aside and picked up my mug of tea. I looked around my simple apartment, my sanctuary, my truth, and I smiled softly. Because at the end of the day, it truly didn't matter how much cash I had. It didn't matter how high I had climbed in my professional career. The only thing that truly mattered was this quiet moment, this deep-seated peace, this total honesty with myself. I woke up early on Sunday morning, just like I always did. 40 years of continuous work had perfectly trained me to rise with the sun's first light. Even though it was technically my day off work, my body just didn't know how to sleep in late anymore. I brewed a strong, black cup of coffee. I sat by the window with the hot mug cradled in my hands. I watched the city slowly wake up, the street vendors opening their stalls, people walking quickly somewhere important. Life continued on, as always, completely indifferent to my little personal drama. My phone suddenly started ringing loudly. It was a very familiar number on the screen. Marcus, I answered immediately. Good morning, son. His voice sounded incredibly tired and heavy. Mom, I really need to talk to you right now. Did something else happen last night? I asked, concerned. A lot, actually, he replied, letting out a deep, audible sigh. Simone and I talked nonstop for hours. Her parents were still there too. It was seriously intense. I took a slow sip of my coffee, waiting patiently. Tell me everything that happened. Marcus sighed deeply again. After you left the restaurant, I went straight back to the table. Veronica and Franklin were still sitting there, waiting desperately for their credit cards to finally work. He confessed the situation. It was absolutely humiliating for both of them. Simone was completely devastated and crying, and I was furious, more furious than I've been in years. I remained silent, allowing him to continue speaking freely. I told them everything, Mom, everything I felt during that dinner, he said. I told them I was profoundly ashamed of them, that they had treated my mother like total trash, that their behavior was completely unacceptable, and that I would never, ever tolerate it again. And what exactly did they say in response to that? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. At first, Veronica tried to fully defend herself. She claimed they just wanted to protect Simone, that they wanted to ensure I had a stable family, that they never had bad intentions. Marcus sounded exhausted. Franklin insisted I was completely exaggerating, that it had been a normal dinner, and that your reaction was totally disproportionate to the situation. I gripped my coffee mug tightly in my hands. Classic deflection, figures. But then Simone spoke up. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. She told her parents that they were wrong, that they had been unbelievably cruel to you, that she had witnessed every single comment, every single look, and every single disguised insult, and that she was deeply ashamed to be their daughter at that exact moment. His voice cracked slightly. Mom, I had truly never seen Simone confront her parents like that before in her life. I offered a small, knowing smile. That's wonderful, Marcus. It means she's finally waking up to reality. Veronica got completely hysterical. Marcus continued, recounting the scene. She started screaming that Simone was totally ungrateful, that they had sacrificed everything for her sake, that they had given her the best life possible, and that she had absolutely no right to judge them now. Franklin, he added, backed his wife up fully. He said we were being manipulated by you, Mom, that you had meticulously planned everything just to make them look bad in front of us. I let out a dry, dismissive laugh. Of course. It's always my fault in the end. That's actually what made them the angriest, Marcus explained. I told them they were right, that you did plan everything out, but that they fell right into the trap only because that's genuinely how they are inside, because they really do treat people they consider inferior badly. I told them you just gave them the perfect opportunity to expose themselves, and they executed it flawlessly. Well said, Marcus, I murmured proudly. Thanks, Mom. I learned it all from the best. There was a comfortable silence between us. Marcus then continued, his voice sounding emotional again. Mom, I need you to know something important. Last night, I made a very clear decision. Simone and I are going to set firm, non-negotiable boundaries with her parents. We are not going to completely cut off the relationship, but we are going to enforce very clear rules. No more comments about money, no more degrading comparisons, and zero attempts to control our life together. He took a deep breath. And if they can't manage to respect those clear boundaries, then they will just have to accept the consequences of their actions. And did they accept your decision? I asked him. No, they absolutely did not. he replied firmly. They left the restaurant furious. They yelled that we were ungrateful children, that we would regret it someday, that when we truly needed help, they wouldn't be there to give it. Marcus finished the account. Franklin even threatened to reconsider his entire will. Veronica said Simone had definitely chosen the wrong family to marry into. I shook my head at their pathetic tactics. Emotional blackmail. The classic, final resort of people who have absolutely no real arguments left. Exactly, Marcus agreed. But this time, it totally didn't work. Simone stood completely firm, right beside me. I did too. He sounded relieved. They stormed out of the restaurant without even saying goodbye, without looking back at us. And honestly, Mom, I felt this huge wave of relief, like this massive weight had been instantly lifted off my chest. That's because it was a real weight, I told him gently. You lifted the heavy weight of living under their constant expectations, under their oppressive control. Now, you and Simone are truly free to build your life exactly however you want to, not as they dictate it must be. Thank you, Mom, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for doing what you did last night. I know it was difficult and incredibly awkward for everyone, but we desperately needed to see it clearly. I needed to see who they truly were on the inside, and Simone really needed to see that there was another, better way to live, a more honest, more authentic way. You are completely welcome, son. I only did what I genuinely believed was the right thing to do. There's one more thing, Marcus added quickly. Simone wants to come and see you in person. She wants to apologize face to face. She wants to talk to you not as a daughter-in-law, trying to look good to her husband, but as a woman who is sincerely trying to learn from this. What do you think about that? I pondered the request for a moment. Tell her she can absolutely come, but not today, Marcus. Give her a few days to properly process this, to think carefully about what she genuinely wants to say to me. Rushed apologies are usually hollow and meaningless. The ones that take time and reflection are the real ones. I'll tell her that immediately, Marcus promised. Mom, one last question. Really, how are you doing after all of this chaos? How do you honestly feel right now? I looked out the window. The sun was fully up now, and the day had officially begun its routine. I'm well, Marcus, I replied truthfully. Better than well, actually. I'm completely at peace, because I finally said every single thing I needed to say, and I don't regret a single word of it. I'm so glad to hear that, Mom, Marcus said. I love you. I love you too. Go and get some rest now. I'll see you soon. I ended the call, finished my coffee, and stood up from the chair. I decided to do something I hadn't done in a very long time, go for a completely aimless walk, without rushing, just walking and observing the world. I got dressed in comfortable close-old jeans, a simple top, and my worn-out sneakers. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. The streets were already bustling with life, families strolling, children running and playing, couples holding hands, vendors selling street food. The warm, inviting smell of fresh bread filled the morning air. I walked through the nearby park and sat down on an empty bench, watching the various people pass by. And I had a sudden, profound realization. Most of these people likely didn't have a lot of money. They probably lived with just enough, worked incredibly hard, and faced daily struggles, but they were smiling, they were hugging each other, and they were clearly enjoying this simple moment together. And then my mind shifted to Veronica and Franklin, with all their immense wealth, their properties, their endless trips, and their expensive jewels. Were they genuinely happy people, or were they just constantly busy trying to prove something to the world, attempting to fill a deep void with material possessions, desperately trying to buy things that could never be bought? Value, respect, and love. An older woman sat down quietly on the bench next to me. Good morning, she said warmly, with a friendly smile. Good morning, I replied, returning her smile. It's a beautiful day out, isn't it? She commented. Very beautiful, I agreed. She took a piece of bread from her bag and began feeding the small flock of pigeons waddling around our feet. I come here every single Sunday, she shared. It's my precious moment of peace, before the hectic week starts all over again. I truly understand that feeling, I told her. I needed a moment of peace today, too. A difficult week then? She asked, showing genuine concern. Something like that, I replied. More like one difficult, life-changing night. She nodded wisely. Sometimes, a single night is all it takes to completely change everything. You are absolutely right, I murmured, marveling at her insight. Can I offer you some unsolicited advice, my dear? She asked. Please, go ahead, I smiled, intrigued. She pointed toward the pigeons on the ground. Look at those birds closely. Some are big, some are small, some have beautiful feathers, and others have scruffy feathers, but they all eat from the exact same bread. They all share the same space amicably. Not a single one of them believes they are better than the others. That's a lovely metaphor, I said, appreciating the thought. It's not a metaphor at all, she gently corrected me. It's the pure truth. Humans are the only animals who invent false hierarchies and measure worth using external things like money. Pigeons don't do that. They just live. They just are. We should all learn a lesson from them. I smiled widely at her. You are completely right. I should actually give classes to some people I know. She laughed lightly. Oh, child, at my age, I don't give classes. I simply observe the world and share what I see as true, she continued, her voice full of experience. But most people don't listen to that simple truth. They are too busy running, buying, and constantly competing, forgetting that, in the very end, we all end up in the exact same place. She looked directly at me. With or without money, with or without jewels, with or without fancy properties, we all eventually turn into dust. How philosophical of you, I commented softly. How realistic, dear. She corrected me again. I have lived 82 years now. I've seen absolutely everything this life has to offer. And I can tell you this truth. The most miserable people I ever met in my long life were the ones who had the most wealth, because it was genuinely never, ever enough for them. She shook her head sadly. They always wanted more possessions. They were always competing. They were always comparing themselves to others. And they ultimately died without ever having truly lived, without ever having truly loved, without ever having truly been their authentic selves. Her wise words resonated deep within my heart, as if she had just articulated something I already knew but hadn't been able to fully express myself. Thank you very much, I told her sincerely, for sharing that essential truth with me today. She patted my hand warmly. You're very welcome, child. And remember this, it doesn't matter how much you have or don't have in life. What truly matters is how you treat every single other person, because that is the only thing that remains. That is what truly transcends this life. That is the only inheritance worth having. She slowly stood up, carefully put her empty bread bag away, and waved goodbye to me. Have a beautiful Sunday, my dear. You too, I replied, watching her walk away. She was a small woman, slightly hunched with age, wearing old, worn clothes and comfortable shoes, but possessing more wisdom and authentic wealth than all the Veronicas and Franklins of the world combined. And I felt overwhelmingly grateful for that chance encounter, for that timely reminder, and for that moment of simple, powerful truth. I stayed on the bench for a long time afterward, thinking, feeling, and thoroughly processing everything that had happened over the last 12 hours, and I came to a final, unwavering conclusion. I didn't regret anything I had done, not a single word, not one single action, because everything I did last night was completely necessary, it was ultimately liberating, and it was deeply honest. And honesty, even when it stings, is always the most rightful path to take. 3 days passed before Simone finally knocked on my door. 3 days of quiet processing, long-needed silence, and deep personal reflection. When I heard the bell ring that Wednesday afternoon, I knew instantly who it was. I opened the door. There she stood, completely without makeup, her hair pulled back simply in a ponytail, dressed in ordinary jeans and a plain top, with absolutely no jewelry or high heels. She looked incredibly vulnerable, real, and totally different from the woman I had seen across the table in the expensive restaurant. Mother-in-law, she said in a low, quiet voice. May I please come in for a minute? I stepped aside immediately. Go ahead, Simone. She entered my apartment slowly, looking around the space with noticeably new eyes. She took in the simple living room, the old, functional furniture, the walls devoid of any expensive art or decor. She sat down on the sofa when I pointed to it. I sat across from her, waiting patiently, not pressuring her, letting her gather her thoughts and find the right words. I truly don't know where to even begin, she finally confessed. Start exactly where you feel ready to start, I replied gently. She took a huge, shaky breath. I came here to apologize to you, mother-in-law, but not just with empty words. She paused to compose herself. I came here to explain why my parents are the way they are, and why I allowed myself to stay silent for so long, tolerating their behavior. I listened quietly, offering no interruption. Simone continued, her voice trembling slightly with the effort. My parents grew up dirt poor in a tiny village overseas, without even electricity or running water, working in the fields since they were very small children. She spoke about their trauma. They saw their own parents die young because of a lack of basic medicine, a lack of money, and they went hungry often. They suffered intensely. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, and they promised each other they would never, ever be poor again. They swore they would do absolutely whatever it took to get out of that terrible situation. I nodded slowly. I understand that completely. That explains a great deal about their behavior. They worked like animals for decades. Simone continued. They saved every single penny they earned. They immigrated seeking any opportunity they could find. Franklin built his business empire literally from the ground up, starting with nothing. She explained the root of their fixation. And when they finally started earning real money, they never, ever forgot what it felt like not to have it at all. That's why they talk about money constantly. That's why they measure everything by that one standard, because to them, money is pure survival. It is total security. It means never, ever going back to that dark, terrifying place they came from. It's understandable, Simone, I told her softly. Trauma does strange, complex things to people's minds. Simone nodded sadly. But that history doesn't in any way excuse how horribly they treated you, mother-in-law. I know that now, and I want you to know that I saw everything that happened. Every comment, every look, every single insult. And I stayed completely silent, because that is what I've been doing my entire life. Staying silent, accepting their behavior, letting them control everything, because they taught me that contradicting them was an absolute betrayal, that it was the ultimate act of being ungrateful to them. And now, I prompted her gently. Now, I finally understand that I was terribly wrong, she replied, her voice filled with conviction, that love is not about oppressive control, that family is not about blind obedience, that I can still deeply love them and yet still fundamentally disagree with their actions and their values. She looked straight at me, acknowledging her husband. Marcus helped me see the truth. And you helped me see the truth, too. Simone paused, gathering her thoughts. That night at the restaurant, when you finally revealed your real self, when you told them everything, it truly felt as if a thick blindfold had been instantly ripped off my eyes. Simone wiped away new tears that were forming. I always knew instinctively that something was deeply wrong. I always felt that the way they constantly measured people's worth was fundamentally incorrect. But I just convinced myself over and over that the problem was me, that I was too sensitive, that I simply didn't understand how the real world worked. But you showed me that, no, that's not true. You showed me that there is genuinely another way to live life, a way where money absolutely does not define your entire worth, where humility is actually a strength, and where authenticity is the true form of wealth. I took a long sip of water from my glass. Simone, I didn't go to that dinner that night to try and change you. I went there primarily to protect myself, to know exactly who I was dealing with in my life. I know that now, she replied sincerely, and I truly thank you for it, because your brutal honesty that night saved me, she continued. It saved me from eventually becoming my mother, from mindlessly perpetuating that toxic cycle, from someday teaching my future children that people are only valuable based on what they possess in their bank account. I absolutely do not want that life. I don't want to be that kind of person. And your parents, Simone? I asked her calmly. How are they doing after all this chaos? Simone sighed heavily, furious, deeply hurt, and completely humiliated. Veronica hasn't spoken a single word to me in 3 full days. Franklin sent me a message saying I had profoundly disappointed him, that I had chosen strangers over my own blood, that I would inevitably regret this decision someday. She paused, then added, and you know what the strangest thing is? I don't feel bad about any of it. I actually feel incredibly free. That's excellent, I told her, smiling. It means you made the right decision for yourself and your marriage. Simone nodded her head firmly. Marcus and I established the new boundaries very clearly. We told them they can absolutely be a part of our lives together, but only if they wholeheartedly respect us, if they respect our choices and our decisions, if they stop trying to control us with their money or with emotional blackmail. And if they simply cannot manage to do that, then they will just have to accept a polite, distant relationship with us. How did they react to that ultimatum? I asked her, curious about the dynamics. Bothly mother-in-law, Simone replied honestly. Veronica instantly started calling us ungrateful, claiming they had sacrificed everything for me. Franklin threatened to disinherit me completely, to cut off all financial aid, as if that was the only thing we actually cared about, as if our genuine love for them depended entirely on their money. Simone's voice held a sad realization, and that's when I truly realized that they actually believe that lie. They really think that their entire value as human beings is solely contained in their wallet. It's a very sad reality, I commented softly. It is very sad, Simone agreed with me. Because they possess so much, yet they seem to enjoy absolutely nothing genuine. All they do is accumulate, compete, and constantly show off to others, but they never once stop to genuinely ask themselves if they are happy, if they have peace, or if they have real, meaningful connections with other people. They just count their properties and feel victorious, while on the inside, they are completely empty. She was silent for a few moments, then looked directly into my eyes again. Mother-in-law, I want to ask you for something very important. Tell me what it is. I want to learn from you, she confessed earnestly. I want you to teach me how to live my life with true dignity, how to be rich in spirit without ever needing to prove it to the world, how to maintain my peace in the midst of any chaos, and how to be incredibly strong without being cruel, she added, with deep sincerity, because that night, I saw something in you that I have never once seen in my own parents. I saw true class. I saw real, quiet power. I saw a woman who never needed to raise her voice to be totally heard. I smiled tenderly at her honesty. Simone, I genuinely cannot teach you those things through words. That is all learned by living, by making serious mistakes, by falling down hard, and then by having the strength to get yourself back up again. I offered her what I could. The only thing I can share is my own personal experience and tell you that the path to authenticity is not easy at all. You will face heavy criticism, constant judgment, and people who simply won't understand why you choose to live your life differently. I gave her the core truth. But if you consistently stay true to your authentic self, if you live your life strictly according to your internal values, you will inevitably find peace. And that inner peace, Simone, is worth far more than any amount of money you could ever possess. I want to try this new path, Simone said firmly. I want to be a better person, not just for Marcus' sake, but for myself, because I deserve to live without that constant, oppressive pressure, without that exhausting need to impress others, without that paralyzing fear of not being enough in their eyes. Then you must do it, I encouraged her strongly. But don't try to change everything all at once. Do it slowly, little by little. Start by seriously questioning your current habits, your purchases, and your underlying motivations. I gave her a simple tool. Before every big decision, ask yourself this question. Is this action truly for me, or is it merely for others' approval? Does this choice bring me genuine peace, or just a temporary appearance of success? Simone nodded, clearly taking careful mental notes of my advice. And my parents' mother-in-law, do you truly think they will ever change their ways? I looked at her with honest appraisal. I simply don't know, Simone. Real change requires you to first recognize that you have a problem, and your parents truly do not believe they have one. They genuinely believe the world is fundamentally wrong, that people are simply ungrateful, and that they are the pure victims in every situation. Until they see that truth, deep change is not possible for them. I concluded with hope. But you can change. You can completely break that toxic cycle. I will break it, she promised, her voice strong. With Marcus's help, and hopefully with some of your guidance, too. You don't actually need my guidance, Simone, I replied, gently shaking my head. You just need to trust your own internal compass again. That quiet voice inside you that clearly tells you what is right and what is wrong. That crucial voice you silenced for many years just to please your parents. Listen to it carefully, trust it completely, and follow it without fear. Simone wiped away her very last tears. Thank you, mother-in-law, for everything you did, for your amazing patience, for your brutal honesty, and for ultimately not giving up on us. There is absolutely nothing for you to thank me for, I said gently. Just promise me one essential thing. When you have children someday, teach them the true value of people, not the price they cost. Teach them empathy, humility, and genuine kindness. Those are the things that cost no money at all, but they are absolutely worth everything in life. I promise you that, Simone said firmly, rising to her feet. I promise you with all my heart. We hugged each other, then a real, warm, and honest embrace. No acting, no false masks. Just two women, truly connecting, as authentic human beings. Simone left about an hour later, visibly lighter, much freer, and with a definite new hope shining in her eyes. I closed the door behind her. I sat back down on my simple sofa, looked around my quiet apartment, and smiled softly, because this was utterly enough for me. This was everything: an honest space, an authentic life, and real, genuine relationships. I didn't need anything more than this. I never truly did. My phone chimed softly. It was a message from Marcus. Simone just told me about her visit with you. Thank you so much for welcoming her, for truly listening to her, and for giving her a real chance to see the truth. I love you more than words can ever express. I replied simply, I love you, too, son, always. I put my phone aside. I sat by my window and watched the beautiful sunset paint the sky in fiery orange and soft pink hues, and in that quiet moment, I understood something fundamental and clear. Real wealth is not defined by how much money you possess. It is defined by how much you genuinely enjoy the little you have, how much peace you feel inside your soul, how many genuine people surround you with love, and how many times you can look in the mirror and be profoundly proud of the person staring back at you. Veronica and Franklin had millions upon millions of dollars, but I had this profound tranquility, this absolute authenticity, this pure, unbreakable love for my son, and that, in every single way that mattered, made me infinitely richer than them both. I never pretended to be poor again. I didn't need to play that game anymore. I had learned everything I needed to learn. I had seen everything I needed to see, and I had liberated everything I needed to liberate within myself. Veronica and Franklin continued to be exactly who they were, rich in material wealth, but tragically poorer in spirit and character. But that was no longer my problem to solve. I had spoken my absolute truth. I had set my clear, firm boundaries. I had protected my internal peace. And for the very first time in a very long time, I didn't have to pretend to be anyone other than who I truly was. I was simply Elara, mother, executive woman, survivor, fighter, and rich in every single sense that genuinely mattered in the world. And that was far more than enough. It was everything I could ever want. I truly enjoyed sharing this story with you. I'm curious to know what you thought of Elara's bold decision. Did she go too far, or was her move completely justified? Share your thoughts and let me know which city you're reading this from. If you enjoyed this narrative and would like to support the creation of more stories focusing on family, wealth, and honesty, please consider leaving a super thanks. Thank you for your incredible support. I look forward to reading your comments. You can also check out the recommended life stories on your screen right now. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more content like this. See you in the next story. With love and respect.